Don't you love it when the most famous atheist in the world accidentally agrees with you and thoroughly undermines his own ideology? Richard Dawkins spent a lot of his career offering terrible responses to arguments for the existence of God, blasting away at the only creed that could keep the United Kingdom at least loosely united and paving the way for Islam to subjugate the leftover fragments of his crumbling society. But more recently, Dawkins has been atoning for his civilization-ending blunders by giving us a bottomless supply of Christian apologetics gold. In his latest interview with Piers Morgan, Dawkins provided the building blocks for my favorite argument against atheism. Dawkins' deconstruction of atheism started when he insisted that his host, Piers Morgan, shouldn't ask what happened before the Big Bang because the word before in that context is meaningless, since time itself came into being at the Big Bang. How can there be before and after when time didn't exist?
I'm trying to tell you what a physicist would say first of all. They would say that you cannot use the word before for the Big Bang. Time began at the Big Bang. There was no before the Big Bang. I know it's contrary to common sense. Physicists don't necessarily deal with common sense.
Notice, Dawkins admitted that what he was saying was contrary to common sense.
I know it's contrary to common sense. Physicists don't necessarily deal with common sense.
And Dawkins insists that non-physicists shouldn't challenge physicists when physicists say things that fly in the face of common sense.
We are not physicists. I, like you, am completely baffled by what physicists say to me, which is that you cannot use the word before for before the Big Bang.
He goes on to acknowledge that what physicists say about this is counterintuitive to non-physicists.
Time itself began at the Big Bang. Now that is totally counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive to me, it's counterintuitive to you, it's counterintuitive to Stephen Meyer, but we are not physicists.
Then Piers Morgan challenges him by saying, look, I can sit here and challenge what you claim as a biologist. Why can't we challenge physicists when they say something that sounds really, really strange? And this is where things get awesome.
You cannot use human intuition. Human intuition was built up by evolution over many millions of years to survive on the African plain, hunting and gathering, looking for water holes, looking for mates and so on. Our brains were not built to understand the profundities of the origin of the universe, the end of the universe, the kind of things that physicists deal with.
Did you catch that? Dawkins describes the origin of our cognitive faculties, a fancy term for the mental processes we use to form our beliefs. He mentions human intuition, but what he says applies to all of our cognitive faculties, reason, perception, memory, and so on. What produced our cognitive faculties? How did we get them?
Human intuition was built up by evolution over many millions of years to survive on the African plain, hunting and gathering, looking for water holes, looking for mates and so on.
Our cognitive faculties were made for helping us survive. They help us find food. They help us find a mate, things like that. What were they not made for?
Our brains were not built to understand the profundities of the origin of the universe, the end of the universe, the kind of things that physicists deal with.
Our brains weren't made for physics. Our brains were so not made for physics that Dawkins finds it amazing that any of us can understand physics.
I think it's actually amazing that at least some human brains are capable of dealing with this kind of stuff. My brain isn't, and nor is yours.
And now we have everything we need for some version of what's called the argument from reason or the evolutionary argument against naturalism. Naturalism is, roughly, the claim that the natural world is what exists or what is real. It's what most people used to mean when they talked about atheism in the strong sense, because most atheists didn't just reject God, they rejected anything supernatural. To keep things clear, I'll stick with saying naturalism, which is the position Dawkins is defending. Naturalism as opposed to supernaturalism. Dawkins accidentally showed that naturalism, the claim that the natural world is all that exists, is self-undermining. It undermines itself. If you take naturalism seriously, you can't take it seriously. Why? Because if you believe in naturalism, you can't trust the reasoning process that produces your belief in naturalism. Naturalism is a hypothesis about all of reality. If naturalism were true, and you received your cognitive faculties, reason, perception, memory, and so on, from the naturalistic processes that are available in your worldview, then you can't trust your cognitive faculties when you're dealing with a topic like naturalism. Human reason wasn't made for anything close to that. As Dawkins said, our brains weren't made to understand these profundities.
Our brains were not built to understand the profundities of the origin of the universe, the end of the universe, the kind of things that physicists deal with.
This is Richard Dawkins, not me, Richard Dawkins, saying we can't trust human intuition on topics like these because human intuition wasn't made for topics like these. This problem can be a bit difficult to get your mind around, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. So let's unpack the brilliant refutation of naturalism Richard Dawkins just gave us. Human beings have the ability to reason. We're using it right now. And we tend to trust our reasoning ability. Piers Morgan and Richard Dawkins wouldn't have discussions about the origin of the universe or the origin of life, and we wouldn't have these discussions if we thought that our cognitive faculties, the processes that produce our beliefs, were unreliable. But naturalists face two massive problems here because they can only explain things by appealing to natural objects, natural events, natural causes. Dawkins brought up one of the problems. I'll start with the problem he didn't bring up. Think about this for a moment. You have beliefs. Ultimately, according to naturalism, your beliefs must be the result of physical processes in your brain. Now, what's going on in here? Particles in motion, chemical reactions, neurons firing, it's all physical, governed by laws of nature. So what really seems like careful reasoning to you is, in reality, straightforward, mechanical, mindless cause and effect. It's a fancy array of falling dominoes. Whatever you believe right now, you are determined by mindless particles obeying mindless laws of nature to believe it. If your beliefs change over time, your beliefs were determined by mindless particles in motion to change. Illusions aside then, you arrive at your beliefs via a process that has absolutely nothing to do with whether those beliefs are true or false. Chemicals couldn't conceivably care less. If naturalism is true, and you believe in naturalism right now, you were causally determined by non-rational particles obeying non-rational laws of nature via a process set in motion long before you were born to believe in naturalism. If naturalism is true and you believe in supernaturalism right now, you were causally determined by non-rational particles mindlessly obeying non-rational laws of nature via a process set in motion long before you were born to believe in supernaturalism. The particles and the laws of nature that causally determined what you believe right now don't care at all whether your beliefs are true or false. A false belief is every bit as determined by non-rational particle interactions as a true belief. So, if naturalism is true, what sense does it make to trust our reasoning ability or our beliefs or even our belief in naturalism? None whatsoever. How can we trust our beliefs when our beliefs are determined by non-rational particle interactions? We can't. Well, we can, but we shouldn't, if naturalism is true. But it gets worse for atheists because, as Dawkins pointed out, your brain wasn't made to get to the truth about the origin of the universe or about ultimate reality. Interestingly, Darwin himself eventually saw this problem. Let's read what he said. Darwin is responding to William Graham, whose book is a defense of design in nature. Darwin writes to Graham, You have expressed my inward conviction, though far more vividly and clearly than I could have done, that the universe is not the result of chance. But then, with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind, if there are any convictions in such a mind? Darwin says that he shares Graham's conviction that the universe is not the result of chance. But he goes on to say that he can't trust his convictions because his mind has been developed from the mind of the lower animals. One could argue that reliable cognitive faculties would help organisms survive and reproduce, and would therefore be selected in the struggle for survival, but this response would be unsuccessful for several reasons. First, even false beliefs can help organisms survive and reproduce. If you refuse to eat certain deadly berries because you believe they're poisonous, and I refuse to eat them because I believe they've been cursed by an angry wizard, we both avoid the berries and we both survive. A false belief can often help you survive just as well as a true belief. Second, for purposes of selection, false beliefs can sometimes be more effective than true beliefs. If you've got the hots for someone, but she's definitely out of your league, and you're too shy to make a move, but you call up the astrology hotline, and the psychic tells you that the position of the planet Venus is just right for love, your false belief in astrology might give you the confidence you need to walk up to her and say, "What's your name, girl? What's your sign?" She might be so impressed by your confidence, and she might so love astrology that you guys have 10 kids together. Your false belief can help you reproduce. That's a selection advantage. Third, the kinds of beliefs that help us survive and reproduce are usually grounded in simple observation and experience. My cave mate Thag died eating those berries, so I won't eat them. But even the lower mammals are capable of learning by observation and experience. This is how mice learn to avoid traps. Human beings obviously have more developed abilities, but not enough to push their reliability far beyond the tasks they were selected to perform. At best, then, we might trust our faculties in matters that involve finding food or using a spear against an enemy or doing something to attract a mate. The kinds of things we were made for.
You cannot use human intuition. Human intuition was built up by evolution over many millions of years to survive on the African plain, hunting and gathering, looking for waterholes, looking for mates and so on. Our brains were not built to understand the profundities of the origin of the universe, the end of the universe, the kind of things that physicists deal with.
So, naturalism combined with natural selection gives us almost no basis for trusting our reasoning ability when it comes to theology, epistemology, ethics, physics, or metaphysics. As the neurophilosopher Patricia Churchland points out, given a naturalistic interpretation of evolutionary theory, truth takes the hindmost in the struggle for survival. Churchland writes, "Looked at from an evolutionary point of view, the principal function of nervous systems is to enable the organism to move appropriately. Boiled down to essentials, a nervous system enables the organism to succeed in the 4 F's: feeding, fleeing, fighting, and reproducing. The principal chore of nervous systems is to get the body parts where they should be in order that the organism may survive. Insofar as representations serve that function, representations are a good thing. Getting things right in space and time, therefore, is a crucially important factor for nervous systems, and there is often considerable evolutionary pressure deriving from considerations of speed. Improvements in sensory motor control confer an evolutionary advantage. A fancier style of representing is advantageous so long as it is geared to the organism's way of life and enhances the organism's chances of survival. Truth, whatever that is, definitely takes the hindmost. If human reasoning ability was selected simply because it helped members of our species get the body parts where they should be, as Dawkins believes, how can we have any confidence in the central claim of naturalism? Your mind wasn't made to get to the truth about all of reality. Your mutant berry finding ability wasn't made for anything close to, here's the correct theory about everything that exists. As David Hume would say, we must be far removed from the smallest tendency to skepticism, not to be apprehensive, that we have here got quite beyond the reach of our faculties. So, does it make any sense whatsoever to believe in naturalism when belief in naturalism undermines the reliability of the very cognitive faculties required to affirm a grand hypothesis like naturalism? Not a bit. And yet, people like Richard Dawkins do trust their cognitive faculties. It's as if, on some level, they believe their cognitive faculties are more than just a mutant berry-finding ability. It's as if, on some level, they understand that they were made for more than just survival and reproduction. It's as if, on some level, they know they were made for something great. It's as if, on some level, they know they're created in the image of God, and they have to suppress that knowledge. Exactly as the Bible says.